Is your soul dead? How would you know if your soul was severely damaged? What exactly is a soul, and what is its function? This is part 1. So God created man with a divine ability to know all things. Nowadays, scientists confirm that man only utilizes between 2% and 10% of his brain. A gifted person such as Albert Einstein probably utilizes about 10%, if you believe Albert Einstein was a genius. However, this is not the design of God for his most sublime creation. The spirit and soul of Adam were cloaked with all intelligence, wisdom, knowledge, and power to govern all of creation. He was created to understand and move in 2 dimensions simultaneously, the physical or natural, and the spiritual. Adam could perceive the natural world through his physical senses, but at the same time he had his spiritual senses totally activated and could see the spiritual reality in all its dimensions. At the same time, he could see the trees in paradise that God provided for him to eat from, as well as the spiritual trees. These spiritual trees were the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Adam would speak with God the Father in the cool of the day, and also with the animals. His spirit and his perception had the ability to discern the meaning and intentions of every sound emitted from creation, and to know what each species was saying. God had given him dominion and authority over them, and as a result, he could communicate with them. This was made clear when the serpent spoke, and they were not surprised. It was normal for them. When Adam named the animals, he did not do it randomly. The name had to do with the nature and attributes of every created being. So Adam saw the characteristics that defined each species of animal and gave it the appropriate name. He even knew how they thought. He named the serpent astute, which means to have mental ability. All of this was possible because his earthly nature was covered with the glory of his own spirit, which was in itself a deposit of the very life of God. As a matter of fact, Adam and his wife were also covered with Christ. He is the first light, and all things were made by him and through him. In him were all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge contained, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love, and attaining to all riches of the full assurance and understanding, to the knowledge of the mystery of God, both of the Father and of Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. That's Colossians 2:2. Adam's thoughts were continuously illuminated by the manifold wisdom of God. He simply knew all things. He was the most brilliant person that ever lived. He was made full of creativity, art, and inventiveness. His spirit had the ability to search out the most complex universes of the microcosm and macrocosm. He understood the most elaborate formulas in mathematics and physics, as well as the perfect harmony of the ecosystem, orchestrated by God and each of its components. He was full of joy, because his spirit breathed the continuous love of his Father, which filled him with plenitude. He was the King of all things, and creation would serve him for whatever purpose came from his heart. He was created to be the architect of what would have been cities full of the glory of God. To sum it all up, he was a true Son of God. You see, God's idea was to create a world full of his sons and daughters, where he would be the Father and God of us all. Unfortunately, his entire plan was brought down because of the fall. In the midst of all this, a plan for its complete destruction was being forged behind the scenes. Lucifer, the archangel of wisdom, had filled himself with evil and had fallen from heaven, along with a third of the angels. He had lied to them, and they believed him, and they fell with him. These angels, however, were not created in the image and likeness of God, and as such were not redeemable, or the Most High determined that it would be that way. Lucifer, stripped of his light, his glory, and his rank, was sentenced to eternal darkness, and from that place he would look on with horror at the creation of a new lineage of divine beings to which the Father would give his authority. And as a spiritual being, Satan did not have access to the natural realm to rule over it as he intended. The serpent in itself was only an animal, limited and incapable of reigning and taking dominion. Satan needed someone who had a mind and more elaborate intelligence. He needed a vessel designed to contain a highly complex spirit, and this was the human being. We must understand that unlike angels and demons, man is the only spirit created with the ability to operate in 2 dimensions. That's because man is a spirit who dwells in a fleshly body. For the spiritual and the earthly to work together, it is necessary to have a third element, that which allows them to communicate and make them compatible with each other. And for this purpose, God created a magnificent device called soul, the soul of man. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Genesis 2:7. And God blew his breath into the body made of clay. He formed not only the human spirit, but also his third element within him. In other words, we were created spirits which live in a body and have a soul to understand and process both the spiritual and the natural world. We are the only creation with this tripartite composition. In a moment, we will see why this device was so coveted by the devil. Psychology, or the study of the goddess Psyche, is oblivious to the life of the spirit, and only considers man as a body and a soul. But the Bible mentions all 3 parts. Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. That's 1 Thessalonians 5:23. When we imagine our soul and spirit, we think of it in the form of a ghost, a humanoid figure similar to us, made from a volatile substance, invisible to the natural eye. Our organism is composed of 8 systems with multiple organs all interconnected. These are the cardiovascular system, respiratory system, digestive system, nervous system, skeletal system, muscular system, reproductive system, and immune system. Also, at microscopic levels, there's a great quantity of things occurring within the chemistry of the brain and the cells. The human body is so complex and is created in such a supernatural form that modern science has yet to discover all of these components. In the same way, our spirit and soul are composed of a series of systems and organs which allow them to discern and know both the spiritual and natural worlds. Nikola Tesla, in his experimentations, discovered that there was an electromagnetic field emanating not only from the brain of man, which controlled various body parts from outside of the nervous system, but that there was also a field of energy emanating from the human heart. And those fields of energy had an effect and would communicate with various parts of the body as well. The soul is what makes a human being different from any other spirit, either angelic or demonic. It is the perfect machine joined to the spirit, which gives man the ability to govern and interpret spiritual dynamics from God or the devil. The soul of man corresponds to everything the spirit of man is. It is like a mirror that reflects everything that is the spirit, so it can be decoded. Once the soul interprets what comes from the spirit, it transfers it to the body, because the three parts are intrinsically linked together. This combination has the ability to interpret, reveal, and manifest everything God is. It also has the ability to interpret any kind of spirits from darkness. It is an instrument designed by the Creator to govern the earth. And Satan knows that among all the animals he could not find a host where he could place a spirit of humanism, witchcraft, drug addiction, or any other spirit. Only the magnificent soul of man could contain them and reveal their thoughts and conduct. So Satan, seeing the greatness and the perfection of the soul, coveted it for himself. This was the instrument that, once under his control, would give him access to the government of the earth and the destruction of his new adversaries, the sons of God. So he came up with a plan and possessed the astute, the serpent, to deceive man and his wife. Now the big obstacle was man's free will, one of the complex organs of the soul. If the devil could sow doubt in the heart of one of them regarding the word God had given them, and chose to believe him instead of God, he would obtain this objective. The ego became a god, just as the serpent had said to the woman. However, one does not know how to be a god, has neither the answers nor the power he should have as such. It lives from the lies of a title that exalts it and feeds it, terrified of having to confront its own deception and seeing its house of cards tumble down. And God said, "But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." Genesis 2:17. Then the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Genesis 3:4. Eating from the tree of life was the divine provision given so that man can live eternally in paradise. Eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil was the alternative, and the trigger from the kingdom of darkness, which would separate man from his Father and his God. The consequence of eating from this tree is the separation of the dimensions of the spirit from the dimensions of the earth, and it continues to do so in those who still eat from it. When Adam and his wife took this step and decided to eat from the alternative tree, they died to their communion with God. Their spirit fell into a state of sleep, and their soul, which had been covered by the splendor of the Spirit, was left naked and condemned to death. It is the condition of the spirit, whether it is alive or dead, in a state of sleep, which determines the final destiny of the soul. After the fall, the spirit lost its dominion and power and its ability to rule. The soul had become now the king and lord of man, governed by the knowledge and the wisdom of darkness. In that moment, the ego or the self rose up from within the man, which would oppose the spirit, just as the two trees oppose each other. Jesus Christ is the tree of life, who is the light of eternal knowledge. He is the first light that illuminates the understanding of the Spirit to know God and His unfathomable mysteries. He is the very life of the Spirit which awakens the whole being, spirit, soul, and body, in order to fill it with His eternal essence. A man that has been convinced from the life of the Spirit of God by Jesus Christ knows he is a son of God and receives his identity from Him. And a soul stripped from God is under the light of science, and earthly knowledge. The same is true for a religious or carnal man who is in darkness and feels the emptiness from within. As a result of his dormant spirit, he feels like an orphan, and his identity depends on the value others give him or from his own fantasy world.